Drowning, crocodiles, cannibals, Tom Hanks. What do they all have in common? Let's find out. Hello humans, I am the Black Cat. The real question is, what happened to Michael Rockefeller? First of all, if you're like me, you're probably thinking, who the hell is Michael Rockefeller? I had never heard of this person before coming across this story, so let me explain. Michael Rockefeller was the fifth child of former US Vice President Nelson Rockefeller. The Rockefellers were, or are, a family of very wealthy businessmen who mainly made their fortune in the oil industry. In 1961, when Michael was in his 20s, he graduated from Harvard University with pretty high grades, studying business economics and history. Not long after that, he joined an expedition for the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology. The Peabody Museum is one of the oldest and largest museums focusing on anthropology. The purpose of the expedition was apparently to make a documentary entitled Dead Birds about the Dene people of Western New Guinea, which is an island off the coast of Australia. Apparently, at this time, a lot of tribes of New Guinea were still very much living traditionally with little contact from people outside of their part of the world. So they wanted to document these tribes before the modern world came in to change things. Michael, who was keen for adventure, jumped at the chance to join the expedition and was hired as a sound recordist for the documentary. During the time they were there, Michael also went and spent some time with the Asmat people, another tribe that occupied the southern area of New Guinea. He was fascinated with the people, their culture, and their wood carving abilities. After the filming and the crew returned to America, Michael decided to return to the islands and spend more time with the Asmat people. He explained that he was craving adventure and he recognized that these people's way of life was going to come to an end and he wanted to experience that before the modern world took over. He also was interested in the possibility of buying some of the wood carvings that the Asmat people made. Having been brought up to understand the art world, he had an appreciation of art, particularly tribal art. So on November the 17th, 1961, Michael, accompanied by a Dutch anthropologist named René Wassing and two local guides, were in a small boat called a catamaran, approximately 6 kilometers from shore, when the boat was hit by a wave and overturned. The two guides apparently swam for help. However, after a couple of nights with no sign of the two men, Michael started to consider the possibility that the guides either didn't make it or weren't coming back. So he decided to try and make a swim for the shore himself. He apparently told René, "I think I can make it," and he tied 2 empty fuel canisters around his waist as a kind of floating device as he swam for shore. The swim apparently would have taken him around 16 hours, so no small feat. This was the last time he was ever seen. However, as it turned out, the two guides did make it back to land, but it took them some time to walk to the nearest village to get help. That's why they took so long. But they did get help, and René was found still with the boat the next day. He told the rescuers what happened to Michael. Naturally, a large-scale search was soon carried out, but they were unable to find any trace of him. They did, however, find one of the fuel canisters on the shoreline, but neither him nor any sign of him could be found, and after 3 years with no luck, he was officially declared dead, with the cause of death being listed as accidental drowning. So what are the theories? One theory that isn't mentioned in all the articles I looked at, but was mentioned in some YouTube comments, was the possibility that René killed him himself. It's interesting that he was never really suspected. Could it be possible that he killed Michael and used the fuel canisters to send his body to the bottom of the ocean? Well, the official report and cause of death was ruled as an accidental drowning. The belief being that he never actually made it back to the shore and that he drowned. Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. The waters around the island are apparently quite rough, plus the fact that they found one of the fuel canisters on the shore could be because it simply came loose and floated away to shore. So the possibility of accidental drowning, yeah, is a high one. Another theory is that he was taken either by sharks or crocodiles. Again, very possible. Sharks like tropical waters, and we all know sharks love the waters around Australia. Also, New Guinea does have freshwater and saltwater crocodiles, so yes, it is possible that he could have been eaten by either a shark or a crocodile. The only thing that kinda gives me pause about that theory is, for one, sharks don't actually like humans. Most so-called shark attacks are sharks trying to work out what this weird looking fish is. It's mostly just a bite, and yes, the bite can do a lot of damage because they have a lot of big teeth, but they don't have hands, so the only way for them to suss something out is for them to use their mouth. This of course causes people to have major injuries from shark bites, and yes, it is possible to die, but it's mostly that people die from blood loss from the bite rather than actually being eaten. Sharks don't necessarily eat people, so if he was bitten by a shark, it's possible he could have died from the bite. It's also possible there would have maybe been some remains found, considering the search started so soon after he disappeared. However, crocodiles will eat people if the crocodile is larger than the person. Crocodiles generally eat things that are smaller than themselves, and crocodiles can grow pretty damn big, so the croc theory is also a possibility. But then, in 1969, an American journalist, adventurer, and author named Milt Macklin allegedly was told by a man only known as Donahue that he had met Michael just a few months ago and that he was still living on the islands. So Milt gathered up a film crew and went to the islands the man told him about to see if he could find Michael, but obviously he was unsuccessful. He wrote a book about his experience titled The Search for Michael Rockefeller, but apparently by the end of the book he came to the conclusion that Michael did indeed make it to the shore, but then was killed by a local tribe, thanks to a rumour that was going around at the time. Not long after the official search was called off, a Dutch Catholic priest who lived with the Asmat people for a few years as a missionary claimed some of the tribe members confessed to him that they had killed Michael. It's believed that he told authorities but was told to keep it quiet. Allegedly, the story goes that 4 men came across Michael as he was approaching the shore. Apparently, a few years beforehand, the Dutch patrol had killed several tribal leaders, so it was for the sake of retribution that they wanted to kill a white man. So the story goes that they saw Michael swimming to the shore and they pulled him up into their canoe and killed him. They then apparently ate parts of his body and took different body parts to different tribes that were affected by the earlier attack. The question, of course, is that a possibility? The idea that killing this one white man that had spent several months with them could be seen as getting revenge for the Dutch attack. I guess anything's possible. Personally, I find it a bit of a stretch. Apparently, at the time, the Asmat wouldn't attack white people because, for one, they knew that their weapons were no match for the Dutch people's weapons, so they would actively avoid them. They also, according to the priest himself, understood the consequences that would come with killing a white man. Then there's the question of cannibalism. From what I've heard about and learnt about over the years, it's a common thing for people outside of a culture to misinterpret something and go on to believe their misinterpretation. Yes, they had skulls and bones, but those are apparently the remains of their ancestors. Many cultures across the globe keep the remains of their ancestors. I mean, you probably know someone who has a loved one's ashes sitting on a shelf somewhere. Then there's the eating people part. Did they eat people? In my research, I found that it was a practice to eat small portions of, again, past family members as a way of honouring them. I know as well that it's a thing like with hunting. The idea of drinking the blood of an animal that you hunted would allow you to take some of the animal's energy, giving the hunter more of a connection to the animal, making it easier to hunt, basically. Also, again, a way of honouring the animal. And yet, killing your enemy and then consuming part of his body would also be a way of getting the person's energy and strength. This is something that is also connected to the idea of eating some human remains, the idea that you get some of the person's energy. I also found an interesting article about a protest against, of all things, Zoo magazine, who were using the idea of cannibalism to promote a free trip to New Guinea, which is idiotic by itself, but Paul Kingsworth, a spokesperson for the Free West Papua campaign, stated that there had been no real evidence of cannibalism for a good 100 years. He goes on to state that most of the ideas of cannibalism came from missionaries spreading rumours, much like the missionary in the story, most likely as a way of demonizing them to make the idea of conversion to their religion seem more palatable. It's a common practice, or it was a common practice with missionaries and religious groups. They did the same with every other cultural group that didn't follow their religion. So the idea of cannibalism in itself, you have to consider the source. I mean, the story of Michael being killed and eaten came from a missionary. In the early 2000s, a documentary filmmaker named Fraser Heston was researching the story from Milt Macklin because it was being made into a play, apparently. During his research, he came across some of the film that was from Milt's trip to New Guinea back in 1969. Remember when I said that Milt Macklin took a film crew with him? Well, one of the crew, a photographer named Malcolm Kirk, who worked for National Geographic at the time, took some footage of the tribes during the expedition. However, Milt didn't actually use any of the film and instead just kept it in storage. So when Fraser Heston found out about the footage, he decided to have a look to see if he could possibly use any of it. While sifting through the old film, he came across one scene that made him take a second look. The footage is of a large group of tribespeople on canoes coming straight at the camera crew. Among this huge group, Fraser Heston noticed that there was one man among them who was lighter skinned. He believed he looked like a white man. He was naked, with feathers and face paint in the same style as the other men in the canoes. He took the footage and zoomed in as much as he could, and when comparing this man to photos of Michael Rockefeller, Fraser Heston believed that they were the same person. He believes this is footage of Michael Rockefeller taken 8 years after his disappearance, the belief being that Michael had joined the tribe and eventually became one of them. When asked about the strange white man, photographer Malcolm Kirk stated, "I can't say I was particularly aware of a light-skinned figure in one of the canoes, but I do recall coming across a reference to an albino male when I glanced through my journal. However, the man in the footage doesn't seem albino to me. He seems like a Caucasian man." The footage is definitely very interesting. Fraser Heston has made a documentary about it called The Search for Michael Rockefeller. If you're interested in this story and you can find that documentary, I think it would be a good watch. I couldn't find it anywhere, so good luck. Anyway, while I was researching this story, I came across another way out there theory. I found a Reddit post suggesting that Tom Hanks is Michael Rockefeller, which is obviously ridiculous, but I thought I would include it anyway. So there you go. There's the Tom Hanks connection. Aren't you glad you waited for that? So what are your theories? Do you agree with any of these theories that I've mentioned here? Or do you have a completely different idea? I would love to read your comments on this. Do you believe he drowned? Do you think he was killed by crocodiles or tribesmen? Or did he turn his back on the modern world and decide to join them? Let me know what you think. But if you've made it this far into the video, I would like you to comment, "Fish aren't food." But for now, that's all the time I have for this mystery. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!